all. Welcome to Lunchtime Topics. I'm Kate Lance here at the Creative Coast in beautiful Savannah, Georgia, and we host our live Lunchtime Topics 1 to 2 times per month, featuring business experts who share their wisdom with Savannah's community of entrepreneurs and innovators. And so today's guest, we have Miss DeLisa Clift, who is the founder and CEO of Global Business Development Strategist. She is also a SCORE Savannah mentor, and that's how I know her. And through her work, she prepares business owners to position themselves in a competitive market. And so she's helped small disadvantaged owned businesses, minority owned businesses, and women owned businesses win over $212,890,000 in private and government contracts over just the past 10 years. So repeat that again, $212,890,000. It's such a big number, I'm jumbling it. So through procurement, readiness coaching, leveraging diversity certification programs, and strategic business planning, business executives are prepared through education and support from a trained professional with over 30 years of business development expertise to diversify revenue and increase profits by 50%. So Ms. DeLisa holds an MBA in human resources from Walden University as well. And we're going to get into that today in terms of human resources and leadership. She's talking with us about her work and how transformational leaders create successful teams. So thank you so much for being here. We're glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
So tell us, what is Global Business Development Strategist exactly?
Sure. Global Business Development Strategist is a small business. I say small because we started in 2020 after realizing how a lot of businesses were struggling with compliance issues around employment-related practices, and they were struggling with how to pivot during the pandemic. I decided to branch off a segment of a business that we were already providing up under one of our other companies that my husband and I both co-manage. And I decided to create a human resource component so that we could help these small businesses to sleep better at night, knowing that their employment practices were being compliant with federal and state laws, and to help them actually maneuver the murky waters of the pandemic.
Lovely. So another pandemic business, a lot of those that started, a lot of opportunity, sadly the pandemic, but opportunity always can be found even in the scariest of moments, especially for business owners. So what services does Global Business Development Strategist provide exactly? You kind of touched on it a bit there, but can you go a little deeper?
Sure. With our 30 plus years of combined experience with our HR professionals and those that are interested in business development, we actually work with both public and private clients, and we help them to look at the disparities that might exist in their employment practices and compliance. And then we create strategies for them to help them to become more compliant and help them to create a culture of compliance with their workforce so that they create an opportunity for the members of their team to be highly functional and educated in the process. And so it creates a complete different culture for their workforce, knowing that there's a compliance issue that's being addressed by professionals.
Lovely. So you're also the executive director of Strategic Development and Growth, Inc. Can you tell us about the work you do with that nonprofit?
Sure. Strategic Development Growth Inc. is actually a nonprofit organization that I founded back in 2010. And the initial concept of that particular nonprofit was to work with women, young girls and women that wanted to enter the workforce and just did not have the skills to do so. So we help them to write resumes and help them prepare for interviews and things of that nature, so that they could actually walk into an interview and be prepared to take on that interview in a very confident way. Over time, that particular nonprofit has evolved. We don't do a whole lot of work in that space anymore, but what we do is we support other nonprofits. So we support other nonprofits that are giving back to the community in an amazing way. So we make sure that we contribute to them. And we provide what we call in-kind services. So if someone needs interviewing techniques and things of that nature, or dress for success techniques, we provide that as an in-kind service for those nonprofits as well.
Okay, great. So tell us, back to leadership a little bit, because that's today's topic. Can you tell us why you're passionate about today's lunchtime topic? It's a question I ask every guest.
Yeah, I'm passionate about today's lunchtime topic because I'm a leader. And being a leader, I realize that we have the ability to either positively affect those people that are around us that we're working with, or negatively impact them. And so what I like to do is to empower leaders with strategies to help them to create and craft visions that are going to allow them to build an alignment with their workforce so that they can create a strategy to actually execute the vision and be a champion around that vision. So working with other leaders to help them to identify some areas where there are opportunities to improve on their leadership characteristics and their traits and their strategies is what I love to do. And so that's why I'm passionate about today's lunchtime topic.
Awesome. So in the title, we mentioned transformational leaders. How do you define transformational, with an emphasis on transformational leadership?
Well, transformational leadership to me are strong role models. I mean, you have to actually mirror what you want to see in your workforce or your team. So you become strong role models because people sometimes mimic what they see. And so if you're not that role model, basically showing them every day how to have strong work ethics, how to be committed and dedicated to the craft of work that you're doing and be proud of that work, then you might not be a transformational leader. Then a transformational leader actually has the foresight to create, I would say, a very broad vision for the organization and how the organization wants to move forward. So a transformational leader has the ability to craft a vision that the entire team can buy into and then to execute it. So in a way, transformational leaders become what I consider as social architects. They basically are able to take a vision and create a whole strategy around that to empower and encourage and to inspire their team to reach that vision. So that's what transformational leadership is to me.
I like that term, social architects. I've never heard that before. Is that something you came up with?
It was probably something that I read not too long ago, but when you look at the entire landscape of what a leader has to do, a leader has to have that social capability of communicating and creating and crafting things around their team. So yeah, I think architects we build, and in our particular space as leaders, we build as well. So I think social architects are actually a really good term to apply for leaders.
Yeah, I think about, I know not everybody's LinkedIn page is the same, but for me, whenever I log on, a lot of the posts I see from my connections are all about leadership and what makes a great leader. And a lot of it is about social self-awareness and what that actually is, and social skills and having those soft skills that are needed to lead a team, right? And empathize with the coworkers or sympathize with coworkers. And, I think you're kind of touching on some of that now. I just love the word social architect because we often think like going to a job and leading is just about getting it done, but there's that social interaction actually matters so much. You can't have the leaders who are just going into their office, closing the door and expecting to do everything from there, right? Being present among your team and interacting with them is so important. And that's what I hear from leaders in our community, really.
Yeah, and I agree with that because at the end of the day, I've actually been in those environments where I've had a leader that would go into their office and close their door, and you would see them when they come in, see them when they maybe come out to use the restroom, and then see them when they get ready to leave for the day. And so when you look at organizations like that, where their leader is not engaged with the team, then the team doesn't have a direction. The team does not have, they can't buy into a vision, because that's one of the mistakes I'm going to say that some leaders make, is because of the fact that they don't understand how to motivate employees if they're not communicating with them, if they're not engaging with them. So it's really important to have that social aspect in a leader to be able to communicate and connect and engage with your workforce the way that you need to, because you need to have that line of communication that not just flows down, but also flows up, so that employees are free to actually tell you some of the things that might not be, I would say, going so well with some of the strategies that you've created as a leader. So I think you have to take that into consideration as a leader.
So kind of speaking on that a little bit more and kind of mistakes that leaders often make, can you talk about some common things that you see among leaders that may be to the detriment of the team? So basically mistakes you've seen in leadership.
One of the main things I would say is having a leader that's closed-minded and that wants to always do things the way that things have always been done. And I think that when you look at what happened during the pandemic, it was hard for some leaders to pivot to online platforms because they were not used to that, and they were afraid of how that they would actually manage those particular types of challenges going through, especially like with Zoom. You know, we had leaders that were not well versed in technology, and realizing in the space that we're in now, technology is really important. Or having leaders that may not be good communicators and not be able to communicate with their employees and be able to communicate an effective vision. So I think that communication is definitely an issue within leadership sometimes. And then not knowing exactly the strength of your workforce. Sometimes if you're in a place and you create the vision, but you've not identified the strengths or the weaknesses of your team, that creates a challenge for you to really utilize everyone on that team to the fullest capability. So being able to, really drill down to find out exactly what everyone in your team, what their work goal is, what is their career goals, and creating something around there. So those mistakes that leaders make are primarily around communication and not understanding and not connecting and not engaging to their workforce.
Got it. Okay. So on the other side of things, what are top leadership strategies for sustainably keeping a team aligned and successful?
Sure. So I would say some top strategies would include being very fluid. You know, you might hear the word agile now a lot in the workplace, where you have to have ability to be flexible. And be flexible in when you're creating your vision. You know, a lot of times when we're creating visions as a leader, we don't talk to our workforce. We don't get their buy-in. And so having a workforce that doesn't understand why your vision is the way that it is, it kind of sort of keeps them out of the way of being able to champion that vision. And so I think that as a strategy, leaders can actually take a long look again in communicating with their workforce and having those particular people on their team to be involved in creating the vision and the goals. One of the things that I think about when I think about vision is Helen Keller, where she talks about the only thing about being blind is having sight, but not a vision, but having no vision. So, you know, it's creating a vision that even a blind person that may not see it, visibly see it, but they can understand it and they can be able to help you to bring that vision to a reality. And then building an alignment around what that vision is, having everyone to understand what direction you're going, and being able to create a strategy around how you're using the team to the fullest capacity. Again, having that team to buy into a vision that's going to help them to move your vision from imagination to reality, and having them to be able to understand what their purpose is. So that's a strategy to build alignment. How can you create a workforce where they understand that their purpose on the team is actually helping the company to move the vision to a reality. So building alignment around that. And then as a leader, being able to execute the vision, execute, everything that you decided to put into your vision, and creating an execution strategy to bring all of that together to where the vision not only is just not a vision, but it's execution of the vision, which becomes a true vision and not just a hallucination. So, being a champion around executing the vision and realizing that without the team and the support that the team needs from a people resource and other types of resources that your team would need to be empowered to do the job, they have to have everything in one bucket. So creating a strategy to where there's vision, there's an alignment of that vision to bring all of your team members into sync with one another, and then being able to support them through the execution of your vision is a strategy that I think that leaders can take a part of.
Going back to what you said about basically letting employees or your team know that they're vital to the vision and moving the company forward, I think that's so powerful. And I think as leaders and employees can lose sight of that sometimes when we aren't touching base. And I think of that in terms of corporations. A lot of times, people working at big corporations can feel like they're just another number, right? And they can't see, they're doing one small part or they feel like they're doing one small part that isn't at the top and getting all of the recognition. So they're not seeing how they're moving the needle forward. Or even at small startups, it can feel that way, right? Like, you're just, maybe not small startups because you have to be so aligned and trustworthy, but smaller companies, you can feel that way. If you don't feel the value of what you're contributing, then why would you want to be at that company? Why would you want to be helping move the needle forward? So I really loved, especially that. And you said something else about, going back to what you said about communicating with your team. There's a remote company that's been remote since I followed them. I actually use their product. It's called You Need a Budget. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a software budgeting tool that looks at budgeting backwards. And I've talked about this in a couple lunchtime topics, but they are a fully remote team. They have been since the start of the company, I think like 10 or 15 years ago before the pandemic, right? And around the holidays, they have a 2-week period that everybody gets off. And during that time, they still have to be available to their customers. They have customers all over the world. And so everyone on the team, from the CEO down to the regular support specialists, have to be on call for support during that time. And they do that so that everyone in the company understands the issues that are happening in the company, and they're close and they're close to those issues, and they're seeing how those issues affect their roles and what they need to be doing. And I just think that's so interesting as in a team that's so disconnected, a leadership tool that has brought them together. They're a really successful company, and they have great, benefits for working at the company, including being remote and including those 2 weeks off, and employees only working like one day during those 2 weeks to make sure their customer support's covered. But they're all getting that taste of like, these are the problems we're facing and how my role actually plays a bigger part in it. So anyways, I just wanted to touch on that. And I think that's so important what you're saying in terms of strategizing. Someone's got a comment here. So let me go ahead and address that. Any recommendations on working with your team remotely, like expectations around establishing trust? Can we go ahead and answer that? I have another question lined up, but I want to touch on that since we're talking about it.
Sure. And can you repeat the question for me, please?
Yeah. So Alethea says, any recommendations on working with your team remotely in terms of like setting expectations around establishing trust? And Alethea, just to clarify, could you just nod? Does that mean like, trusting your workers to actually work while they're working remote?
Exactly. Making sure that they're logged in when they're supposed to be, they're logging out when they're supposed to be, that they're getting their projects done in a timely fashion, I don't want to like hover over them to micromanage, but I do want them and I need them to have the flexibility to work from home because I need that flexibility too. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page regarding work from home expectations. Any advice?
Yeah, and I think that that's a good question because in this day and time where there's a lot of companies that have taken, their positions remotely, you have to, first of all, create, I would say, a policy around what that expectation is. So it's just like when you're bringing anyone into a new role, you set the expectations for what you want that person to do, even if they were in a seat in your office. So if there's a requirement where you definitely don't want to micromanage someone, you just want to make sure that the job is done. Do you have something that's built around that they have to be signed on to the computer for a certain length of time? Do they have to be available for maybe a daily meeting or an intake meeting in the morning and an out brief meeting in the afternoon before closing? Do you have something that like that in place that will help you to know that the person is performing during that particular day? And if you don't have something like that, I know that there are some tools that you can use if you all are on the same VPN to know whether or not a person is actively working, if they're working on a site that they would normally work on if they were in your office. You can kind of track their work activity during the day. So if you don't have something like that, create an expectation. If you're expecting for them to show up at 9 o'clock in the morning and they are to be on the computer until 4 o'clock and they have an hour for lunch, how much of that time do you expect for them to be physically working on the computer so that you know that they're being productive?
Okay. Yeah, those are good recommendations. I have been saying that I need like a daily intake meeting and maybe one in the afternoon as well, but we have not been consistent with that. We do use Teams in the office. We work in the office 3 days a week, and then we all work from home 2 days a week. And so we do have that meeting on like Wednesday where we set expectations of, what you have a work plan for your work from home days, what you're supposed to be working on, but we haven't been having those consistent meetings. So I guess that's on me too, consistent communication.
Yeah. And I think that would help you to start building trust around those employees that are really producing. And I mean, a lot of times we can kind of see when a person is producing and when they're not. Even if you're not having those meetings, simply by, whatever customer that you're serving, where they're not, you're getting complaints, and you don't want it to get to that point. So I would say set the expectations, have your follow-up meetings. And even if the follow-up meeting is not a virtual meeting, maybe it's an out brief of an email that they've told you what they produced for the day. So I think there are several different ways that you can approach that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I wanted to go ahead and address that question because it's kind of moving into the next question, right? So I was going to say or ask, since the pandemic, in what ways have founders and managers needed to change their leadership strategy or style, especially since we're all remote now?
Yeah, we've had to really lead through some murky waters, not knowing exactly what to expect with some uncertain times. I think that, again, they've had to find ways how to engage, when people are working remotely, again, setting those expectations. I think that's what I know have helped a lot of the clients that we serve, is to keep that line of communication open. No, you might not be in the same building, but you need to communicate on a daily basis as to what's going on from a performance standpoint. And then being able to know that communication goes both ways. Again, having an open door, from a leadership perspective, you want to hear when your employees are being challenged with something that might not be related to work. It could be a personal issue that they're experiencing, and that could be affecting the way that they show up for the job. So, leadership really.
How's it going?
Yeah.
Walter just took it upstairs, even though
A second here, we're going to mute.
Yeah. Leaders have had to really learn some more, I would say, creative ways to engage with the employees during the pandemic, and setting expectations. I would say realistic expectations, because when we're working remotely, and I think even if you're sometimes in an office setting, we assume that individuals are working 8 hours a day if that's where they're scheduled to work. But the reality of it is they're really not. So can we have that same expectation when they're working in a remote environment, that they're going to be sitting at a computer for 8 hours a day? That's probably not likely going to happen. But again, being able to measure the performance of that individual on a consistent basis so that you can address any, I would say, issues before they become problems.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So I feel like some of this is overlapping with another lunchtime topic that we talked about on efficiency and productivity, like measuring productivity and the risk of it. Like when you're in the office, I often feel like I get interrupted way more, right? Like because you're going desk to desk and you're not at your desk 8 hours a day. It's actually really unhealthy for your creativity, for your production to be at your desk all those 8 hours, right? Like, got to get out. And I find myself when I'm at home, actually, and I'm working from home, I find myself working a lot more because I have my head down. There's fewer interruptions. And that being said, I read a book from, I can't remember her name. It's called Flex. And she's been a proponent of flexible work arrangements for years, this author. And she talks about how when they actually measure how many hours people work when they're in the office, desk jobs, right? It usually comes to about anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, actually, which is interesting because we think just someone being present is them showing up to work and doing what they need to do, but not necessarily. It depends on the type of job you have, but I'm talking about specifically for knowledge-based or desk-based jobs, right? So I thought that was an interesting fact to throw in. I didn't mean to cut you off if you had something else to say.
No, and I think that you're exactly right, because I've experienced that firsthand in environments where some of my clients' employees are remote now. And I cannot tell you that they are seeing more productivity from those particular employees than they did when they were sitting behind a desk in their office. So they're more comfortable at home, right? So they don't have to get up and dress up unless they're in a meeting, Zoom meeting. And so they're able to spend more time doing the work outside of driving, outside of actually gathering at the water cooler or the coffee pot for morning chats in the afternoon as well. So yeah, I think that a lot of times I've been a proponent of flexibility in the work schedules for a long time because I realized that they work. And I'm not a stickler with the individuals that we have. We have one person that's in the office and everyone else that we work with is remote. And my intention for them is to just know, I don't care how many hours of the day that you work, just make sure that those work hours are productive and that I'm paying for a productive quality work that you're going to provide. And there are tools that we measure them by and making sure that happens.
Awesome. Okay, so kind of related to that, the labor shortage is still a huge issue right now. So what advice do you have for company leaders in order to help them make their company and job openings as appealing as possible to candidates?
Yeah, I think now leaders have to be a little bit more transparent in their job announcements because a lot of times now you're competing with everyone for workers. And so understanding that people want to know when they're coming going to apply for a job, what benefits are you offering? You might want to include that in your job announcement. Talk about the company, talk about the company's culture, talk about some of the incentives that you're offering a new applicant when they come in, and make it easy for them to apply. I know on LinkedIn, there are job announcements all the time that you can just click. You already have your resume saved. And you can just upload your resume. Don't make it hard for people to apply for your job. And before you start making a job announcement, do a job analysis first. Do an evaluation of exactly what you need so that when you create a job announcement, it's very specific, it's very clear, and it's very direct. There's nothing worse than, for you to go out there and see a job announcement, and when you call or you get to the interview, it's something completely different. So evaluate your needs for the job before you post that particular announcement for the job, and give as much information as possible. People today want to know exactly, is it going to be worth their time to work for your company? Is it going to be worth their time to even apply? So again, make your job announcement as detailed as possible with as much information on your company and all incentives that you're going to offer.
Great. We had a comment from Jessica, and regarding that last question in terms of tracking time and whatnot. She said task-based versus time-based has been very helpful for me in changing culture and getting through to boomers. So I just wanted to recognize that in the comments. So we're coming up on the end here of our questions, and I want to, last question is always, where can people find you? But before we do that, does anybody have any other questions for DeLisa before we close out? Feel free to put them in the chat, or you can come off mute, Alethea.
Yes. So DeLisa, I was reading a little bit in your profile. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what you do, because I am actually interested in pursuing government contract opportunities, but I'm finding it extremely challenging, especially for a small business of just like 5 employees. So I was wondering, what type of services do you offer? Talk a little bit about business development.
Certainly. So the name of my company is Global Business Development Strategist. And with that particular company, we focus on all things human resources related. We do business development on that side as well, but it's primarily focusing on with C-suite executives, identifying, some of those disparities that they might have in employment and compliance related issues. On the other side, my husband and I have another company that's called Strategic Biz Solutions Unlimited. And that particular company focuses on all things government contracting. So what we do, we work with companies that are interested in going into government contracting, whether it's at the local, state, or federal level. And then we actually make sure that you have the, I would say, business structure to prepare you to do that. So there are some things that you have to do prior to submitting a response to an RFP. So we want to make sure that you have all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed and all the resources that you need to jumpstart you into that space. We then teach you how to utilize small business certifications in order to get you through the door much quicker. So those small business certifications are things like your Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, which is a GDOT certification that's statewide, is known statewide, and is accepted statewide. And you also have a Minority Business Enterprise certification that is also recognized on the local, state, and federal level. And you have other small business certifications like your Woman-Owned Small Business certification. And if you're anything related to a veteran, if you're a veteran yourself, then there's veteran certifications as well. All of those are considered to be small business certifications that you can leverage to get you into the government contracting, subcontracting arena. And with 5 employees, Alethea, I'm not sure exactly what your business does, but that's a good number to start. We have seen businesses with just one person start go into government contracting and get contracts with just one person. So it's a process, but it's a process to make sure that you're ready for that type of government contracting that you're pursuing.
Well, that's kind of encouraging. I have the certifications. I've even responded to RFPs, but I'm not hearing anything.
Don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged, because the average person, you can submit RFP responses for up to 2 years before you ever get through the door, but it's about building relationships. And so we teach you how to do that as well.
Yeah, that's the part that I'm missing. So I'm going to reach out to you and see if I can get some help with that, because even when I reach out to them about solicitations on the forecast, I still hear crickets. So I don't know what, I'm not saying what it is that they need to hear. I'm having trouble establishing that relationship.
Yes, please find me. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can message me there, or you can go directly to either one of the websites. The one for global is globalbizstrategist.com. And the one for strategic is thestrategicbiz.com.